Today's lesson is on the external anatomy of the human heart. Now, in lab we've been working with sheep hearts because they're remarkably similar to humans, and this will help us with this dissection. So at the end of our time today, you should know all the basic external features, and the second video is going to have to do with some of the internal features, and then the third video is going to be on the cardiac cycle. So we'll break them into small little pieces so that you can study them a little bit more effectively. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. We're going to first of all put some pins on here so it kind of will guide us through the process of making sure that each of the pieces are talked about, or each of the parts or anatomy of the heart are talking about. We're going to start first of all with the left and the right, anterior and posterior. As we look into this particular heart, that kind of is if it was with a sheep, for instance, and we had cut it right down the chest, the sternum, and opened it up. That's the orientation we would see. It's slightly pointing to the left, and of course what's sticking out right there is the right hand side. So if we were to label this, this right here would be the right side right here. So let's go ahead and label that. That's be the right side. Then over here would be the left side. And then as we're looking at it right here, this is the anterior side. I'll just abbreviate it, ant. So we have the anterior side, which is basically the front side of the heart. Then we have the right and the left side. Now with knowing that, obviously the back portion would be the posterior side. And so it's really important to kind of keep the orientation firmly in your mind so that you'll understand that. Now this, I'm going to click on this. That's the anterior side. The posterior side is obviously the back side where most of the vessels are. So I'm going back to the anterior side right now. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the right side of the heart first. One of the most major features is this area right in here. So I'm going to kind of concentrate right in this area for right now. That area has a couple major features there. First of all, if we take a look at this portion right here, and we look at this portion right here, that's the superior and inferior vena cava. And I'll just put vena and cava, or cava as some people call it. Everything that drains all the blood that's in the head that's been used uses up as oxygen, so it's oxygen poor. The oxygen poor side, this comes from the head, and that oxygen poor blood from the head is going to drain the superior vena cava. So everything up here is called the superior. I'll just call it super for now. And it's going to all drain. Oops, I was picking an R here. All the superior vena cavas are going to drain all the head, the shoulders area in this direction. Whereas over here in the body, everything basically below the shoulders, excuse me, all the way to your toes, that blood that's oxygen deprived or oxygen poor will travel up the body through this called the posterior vena cava. So all of the deoxygenated or oxygen poor blood will be coming in here from the body, over here from the head, and that's called the vena cava. So the vena cava is located either here, and that was the superior vena cava, and over here would be the inferior vena cava. So those are major features. So the vena cava is located on the right side. Now there's other two parts to the heart, or chambers, if you will. This part is probably the most, if you will, famous, and it's called the right atrium. Now the right atrium kind of has this small little appendage or a sac next to it, and that's called the right auricle. Both of these are very thin-walled, so they can stretch as the blood comes in. Now understand that the blood on the right side is not under as much pressure because it's near the kind of the end of the road, so the pressure is a little less than it would be on the left side. And the other feature about the right side is that it has mostly oxygen poor blood coming to it. So this is the right atrium. This would be the right auricle. Both of these are thin-walled, relatively low pressure, and it's allowed to expand, kind of like a balloon. So it can expand if, like for instance, under exercise, it needs a little space, it's going to expand. And it's has a kind of a cool matrix. If you look on the inside part of the heart, and I hope you will, especially in the auricle and in the atrium, it has this lattice of fibers on the inside part of the atrium and also the auricle. And what that does is it acts kind of like netting, so when it stretches, it's not going to break. And so that allows it to be very stretchy, but also very, very thin at the same time. Now, the other chamber of the heart is going to be located right here. This is another very prominent feature on the right-hand side. And this is the right ventricle. I'm going to take a little closer look at that. So let's click over here where it says media. We're going to take a couple of different looks. Let's first of all look at it as it's pumping its heart. So when the heart is pumping, whoops, let's go back here again. Turn that off. Can we go back to the right ventricle, go to the media, and I want you to notice as it's pumping, the ventricle is sending blood to to one different place in particular, and that's called the pulmonary trunk. And the pulmonary trunk has a valve in it, and that particular valve is, of course, and we'll talk about that later, is guiding the blood to the lungs. So in this case, all the blood is coming through the pulmonary trunk and then out to the pulmonary arteries. This blue part is our atrium and auricle working together. So once that squeezes off, it's going to squeeze down on those real thin walls. It's going to push it, and it's going to go through another valve, and we'll get to the name of the valve in another video. And it goes into this ventricle. This ventricle is relatively thicker walled, so it can put a little bit more pressure than the atrium can, so it squeezes the blood and it shoots it up through the pulmonary trunk. And let's take another look at it. Here's the ventricle. Here is this is the right ventricle. This right here is the pulmonary trunk. So it's going to send blood into the pulmonary trunk, which will send that oxygen-poor blood into the lungs to release or exchange the CO2 that's in that blood with oxygen, so it can get reoxygenated. The blood throughout the body can reoxygenate it. So that's the right side. Oh, one last thing on the right side. This is the pulmonary trunk, and we've already seen that trunk in action, but let's take a look as it's highlighted. This is the pulmonary trunk. It's kind of the stint or the part of the pulmonary system, which will take blood, oxygen-poor blood, from the right ventricle, push it up through the trunk into the pulmonary arteries, which will, of course, put the oxygen-poor blood into the lungs to get more oxygen. So let's go ahead and spin this just a little so we go over to the left side, just a smidge. All right, now we're going to start up here. This one is kind of hidden, and if you're not real careful, we're going to put this on the lateral side now. Now, what I've done is, this is the right side. Actually, this is the anterior side. If I did it lateral, it would look like something like that. But I'm going to spin it just a little bit, and now we're on the lateral side. We're looking at the left lateral side of the heart. And the reason I'm doing that is because this little portion right here is kind of hidden. It's kind of snuck in behind the pulmonary trunk, and this is the left auricle. It serves kind of the same purpose as the right auricle and right atrium in that it is thin-walled. It's going to expand under exercise or under load, but it doesn't provide a lot of pressure. Just kind of, the auricle and the atrium are basically vessels to collect blood. It's not going to put it under pressure. It's going to collect the blood and then direct it through the valve system into the left ventricle. And so we're going to look at, that's the right ventricle, so you kind of get your place. Notice how big it is in comparison to the left ventricle. This is a lot larger area. Also, it has thicker walls in it, so it actually generates a little bit more pressure so that it's going to take all of that oxygen-rich blood that came from the lungs and get it out through to the rest of the body. Now this is the apex or the point. I just kind of want to point that out primarily because during your dissection we're going to ask you to kind of start your cut and end your cut at the apex. And then kind of our the other part to their left side is this is the ascending aorta. This whole thing right here is called the aorta. It's a really large hose, and that hose carries lots of the blood to the rest of the body. It's under pressure. This is kind of the entry point for all that brand new oxygenated blood or oxygen-rich blood that came from the lungs, and away it goes up to the head, and then of course the descending aorta to the rest of the body. Now there's some other things in here now. You can't see that very well from here, but all of these little tubes coming off the pulmonary area is also connected to the left atrium, and that is called the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins have oxygen-rich blood. You think a vein is supposed to be really have oxygen-poor blood, but primarily because of the direction it's going, it's a little bit opposite. That's the only place it's opposite. So veins in the pulmonary side are actually oxygen-rich and carrying it to the left atrium. So let's spin this a little bit more that way. There we go. So those are just the major parts or anatomy of the heart, and you're going to be taking a look at the inside next. So I hope this helps as we review this, and then we'll talk a little bit more as we basically cut this in half and look on the inside. All right? Thanks.